What happens? The moment she realizes, you'll never text again. Not later. Not someday. Never. At first, it doesn't hit her phone, it hits her ego. Because for the first time, the silence isn't hers. It's yours. The same man she once ignored is now the one she can't stop thinking about. Her confidence cracks when she opens her messages and sees nothing. Nor new texts. No, just checking in. No reaction. Just peace. She tells herself, you'll reach out again like you always did. But deep down, something feels different this time. Your silence doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like understanding. And that terrifies her, because she's starting to realize what you already learned. Chasing peace through chaos only destroys it. And when a stoic man finally chooses silence, that silence becomes the loudest sound she'll ever hear. Now let's break down what truly happens when a woman realizes your silence isn't a tactic, it's transformation. At first, she feels relief. No unread messages. No buzzing phone. No weight of expectation. For the first time in a long time, she feels free. Or at least, that's what she tells herself. She scrolls through her feed, posts a photo, laughs a little too loud with her friends. She convinces herself she's moved on. He'll text again. She says quietly in her mind, he always does, because that's how it always worked. You were predictable, reliable. When she pulled away, you reached out. When she got cold, you tried to warm her. When she went silent, you filled the silence with effort. And that's the illusion, her illusion of control. She mistook your kindness for dependency. She thought your patience meant weakness. Every time you came back, you confirmed her belief that she could leave without consequence, that your loyalty was guaranteed. She never questioned it, until now, because this time, the silence isn't short. It stretches, it grows, and suddenly, the control she thought she had begins to crack. Days pass, then a week, then another. Still nothing. No text. No, how are you? No, just checking in. She starts to feel a discomfort. She can't quite name a quiet panic that hides behind her pride. She replays old messages, looking for signs, trying to understand when the script changed. It's subtle at first, a restlessness, a thought she pushes away, but the truth keeps whispering, you're not coming back. And the moment that realization hits, something inside her shifts, because what she's really losing isn't just your attention, it's her reflection in your validation. For so long, she saw herself through your eyes. She measured her worth by your responses. Every time you texted back, she felt wanted. Every time you called, she felt powerful. But your silence, it erases that mirror. Now, she's left alone with herself, with a self she doesn't fully like, with feelings she spent years avoiding. It's in that silence that she begins to understand what your presence actually meant. You weren't just a man who texted her, you were the man who saw her, and being seen made her feel alive. But now, no one's watching, and for the first time, she realizes how much of her identity depended on your gaze. That's the paradox of power in relationships. The one who needs to be noticed loses control. The moment attention disappears, and the one who can walk away in silence becomes the one who defines the silence. When you stopped texting, you didn't just stop communication, you shattered a pattern. You removed her emotional supply. The subtle stream of validation she fed on. That's why it hurts more than she expected. Not because you left, but because you left without explanation. See, explanation gives her control. If you tell her why you're gone, she can argue. If you explain your silence, she can interpret it. But when you say nothing, she's forced to face the unknown. And nothing unsettles the human mind more than unanswered questions. Now, her mind becomes the battlefield. Every silence becomes a sentence. Every day without your message becomes a reminder that you've changed, and that realization burns deeper than any argument ever could. She begins to romanticize what she once dismissed. Your calm that once annoyed her now feels rare. Your patience that once bored her now feels valuable. Your detachment that once felt cold now feels like power. Because the longer the silence lasts, the more her mind fills in the blanks. And in those blanks, she rebuilds your image, not as the man who waited, but as the man who walked away without losing composure, the man who didn't explain, didn't plead, didn't react, the man who found peace where she expected chaos. You see, in her illusion, she always believed she held emotional control. She could pull away, come back, test, disappear, and you'd still be there, the steady one, the reliable one. But control isn't about who speaks louder. It's about who can stay silent longer. And now, her silence, once a weapon, has turned against her. It's no longer a test for you, it's a test for her. Because the moment you stopped reacting, the entire dynamic flipped. She thought silence meant power. You showed her silence can mean peace. She thought silence would make you chase. You showed her silence can make her reflect. This is what most people never understand about Stoic control. It's not about punishing someone with distance. It's about protecting your energy from the cycle that drains it. You didn't stop texting out of anger. You stopped out of clarity. You realized that the peace you were begging her to give was something you could give yourself. And that's when everything changes. Because a man who stops trying to be understood becomes dangerous not to others, but to everything that once controlled him. Now she's the one checking your profile, wondering if you're thinking about her, replaying old conversations, searching for signs that you still care. But all she finds is silence. And that silence doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like presence, the heavy, grounded kind of presence that lingers even when you're gone. That's when she finally understands the truth. You didn't disappear to make her miss you. You disappeared because you finally respected yourself enough to stop explaining your worth. And once a woman realizes that your silence isn't waiting, it's evolution. She starts to feel what you once felt: confusion, loss, and quiet acceptance. Because silence always reveals what words could never fix. It strips away illusion. It exposes who's truly at peace and who's pretending to be. And that's why your silence hurts her more than any goodbye ever could. Because a goodbye can be argued, but silence Silence is final. Silence is truth. At first, silence feels like peace to her. No more tension. No more uncertainty. No more waiting for a message that never arrives. She tells herself, "Finally, I can breathe." But as the hours turn into days, and days into weeks, something strange happens. The silence she once enjoyed starts to echo. It grows louder, not outside, but inside. See, silence is never empty. It carries the weight of everything unsaid, and your silence, specifically, carries gravity. It's not avoidance. It's not punishment. It's presence. The kind that lingers. The kind she can feel in the pauses between her distractions. At first, she tries to drown it out. She goes out more, scrolls more, talks to other men, not because she wants them, but because she wants to feel something familiar, something to fill the void you left behind. But what she doesn't understand is that void isn't about you. It's about the part of herself that came alive only when she was near your calm, because your energy was different. You didn't demand attention, you commanded it quietly. You didn't chase validation, you created it through discipline. And now that you're gone, the contrast burns. Every conversation she has feels shallow. Every laugh feels forced. Every moment of excitement fades too quickly. That's how the echo of silence begins. It starts as an irritation, a whisper she tries to ignore. Then it becomes curiosity. Why hasn't he reached out? Then it becomes doubt. Did I push him too far? And finally, it becomes realization. He's really gone. That's when she replays the past like a film. Your words, your tone, the last conversation, everything now feels heavier in her memory, because the silence has given those moments new meaning. When you were still there, she overlooked your effort. Now, those same efforts feel sacred. Every text you once sent becomes a ghost that haunts her in the middle of the night. She scrolls through your old messages, the ones she left unanswered, the ones she thought didn't matter, and suddenly, they do. Every "take care" sounds like a goodbye she didn't hear. Every "it's okay" feels like the calm before your final silence. It's in this quiet reflection that she begins to understand something she never did before, that peace is not boring. Peace is power. And she traded it for chaos because chaos felt familiar. Now she feels the cost. Her nights stretch longer. Her mind, once full of noise, becomes a battlefield of what-ifs. She wonders if you think about her too. She wonders if your silence is anger or acceptance. But what hurts her most isn't not knowing. It's realizing that she no longer has access to the answer. She used to be able to trigger a reaction from you, a text, a call, a response. Now, even that's gone. And that's when your silence transforms from absence into authority. Because real power doesn't chase, it attracts, not through words, but through energy. She starts noticing little things, how your silence feels heavier than anyone else's attention, how her own posts feel meaningless without your reaction, how every new man she talks to reminds her of what you used to bring effortlessly stability. This is the echo of silence. It's not a sound. It's a vibration, a frequency that still hums in her subconscious, reminding her that some presences are so strong they don't need to speak to be heard. In that echo, she starts to project her own guilt, because the mind hates emptiness. So it fills silence with imagination. She begins to imagine you moving on, not desperately, not angrily, peacefully. She pictures you reading in quiet spaces, working on yourself, building your discipline, and that image shakes her more than any argument ever could, because now your peace has become intimidating. Your silence has become magnetic. That's the irony of detachment. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, the world starts noticing it. The moment you stop chasing validation, those who undervalued you begin to crave your energy again. It's not manipulation, it's mathematics. What's rare becomes valuable the moment it's no longer available. You became rare the moment you stopped explaining yourself. And so, the echo continues. Every morning she checks her phone, half expecting your name to appear. Every night she tells herself she doesn't care, but her heart still listens for a sound that never comes. This is where the silence starts doing what words never could. It teaches her that not all attention is love, that not every reaction is strength, and that the man she lost didn't leave to hurt her, he left to heal himself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do, that's you now. You no longer react to what she does. You no longer measure your worth by whether she understands you. You've learned that peace isn't found in fixing others, it's found in mastering yourself. And that mastery radiates louder than any text ever could. The echo of your silence has become her mirror. She looks into it and sees not you but herself, unmasked, unfiltered, and for the first time, accountable. That's why silence is undefeated. Because while words argue, silence reveals. While noirs distract, silence confronts. And while others seek validation, you've already found clarity. Ego is loud when it's being fed, but silence starves it. In the beginning, her ego feasted on your effort. Every time you reached out, every time you apologized first, every time you tried to fix things that weren't even your fault, her ego grew stronger. It wasn't love she was addicted to. It was power. You see, when a woman gets used to your pursuit, she starts mistaking it for her worth. She starts believing that your consistency is her validation, that no matter how she acts, you'll always return. It's not arrogance. It's conditioning. Because your kindness became her comfort zone, your availability became her illusion of superiority. But then you stopped. And when you stopped, the power supply was cut off. That's when her ego began to panic. At first, it whispered, "He'll be back." Then, when you didn't return, it shouted, "He must be talking to someone else." Finally, when silence continued, it trembled. Maybe he really doesn't care anymore. That's when the cracks appear. Because ego can survive anger, but it can't survive indifference. Ego feeds on reactions, love, hate, conflict, attention. It doesn't matter. As long as you respond, you keep it alive. But when you become silent, truly silent, you remove its oxygen, And that's the part no one prepares her for: the void after losing control. She doesn't miss your words. She misses what they gave her: reassurance, relevance, dominance. She misses the comfort of knowing she could always trigger emotion in you, because that meant she still mattered. Now, she doesn't know if she matters anymore. Your silence has turned her mirror back on herself. She's forced to look at her own reflection without the filter of your attention. Every unreturned message, every ignored call, every empty space where your presence used to be, now reflects her own behavior back at her. It's no longer about you leaving. It's about her realizing why you left. And that's what breaks the ego: not rejection, but reflection. She begins to notice the things she once mocked. Your patience wasn't weakness. Your calm wasn't detachment. Your quiet strength wasn't lack of emotion. It was discipline. You had emotional control, something her ego never did. She used manipulation. You used restraint. She used words. You used action. She used noise. You used silence. Now she finally sees the difference. Every new man she meets reminds her of what she lost. Not because they're unworthy, but because they're reactive. They chase validation. They explain too much. They apologize for being masculine. And suddenly, she realizes the peace she once called boring was the rarest form of power. That's the fall of the ego, when she sees your stillness as strength instead of silence. When she realizes you weren't trying to win her, you were trying to master yourself. It's in this phase that she starts reaching for what's gone. A subtle story view, a random "hey," a reaction to your post. She's not reaching out because she loves you. She's reaching out because she needs to know if she still has access to your energy. But this time, the door doesn't open, and that shakes her to the core, because now she's not dealing with the man who used to chase. She's dealing with the man who chose peace over validation. The same silence she once weaponized is now being used against her, not out of revenge, but out of evolution. You've become what she never expected, a man who doesn't need her attention to feel whole. And here's the irony: when you needed her, she felt powerful. But when you stopped needing her, she felt empty. Because ego needs to be fed constantly. And your silence is fasting, it's starvation. She scrolls through your old texts again. Not to reminisce, but to feel. She wants to feel anything that reminds her of being wanted. But the words don't work anymore. They read differently now, like relics from a version of you that no longer exists. The man who once explained himself is gone. The man who once begged to be understood is gone. The man who once overgave is gone. In his place stands someone she doesn't recognize, composed, quiet, untouchable. That's what frightens her most, not that you've changed, but that you've grown. Growth is the ultimate ego killer, because it means you've learned the lesson she never did, that peace doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." You've done exactly that. You stopped trying to convince her that you're different and became different. You stopped seeking her understanding and found self-mastery. You stopped chasing external validation and discovered internal peace. And that evolution is what makes your silence so heavy, so magnetic, Because silence backed by growth is not absence, it's presence on another level. You didn't just walk away, you ascended. She senses it now. That subtle shift in energy, that calm, detached presence that no longer reacts, no longer seeks, no longer breaks. And in that realization, her ego begins to collapse. Because ego cannot coexist with humility, it cannot survive in the presence of true stillness. It dissolves when faced with a man who no longer plays the game. And so, she starts to question everything. Was she wrong? Did she push too far? Did she lose something real? But the answers don't matter anymore because you're no longer waiting to be understood. You've learned that peace is not given by others. It's built from within. Your silence has become your declaration. You didn't say you've moved on, you proved it. You didn't tell her she lost you, she felt it. You didn't announce your evolution, you lived it. That's why the fall of her ego is inevitable. Because deep down, she knows the truth. She didn't just lose a man. She lost her access to the energy that once made her feel alive. And the man who can take back his energy without anger, that man cannot be controlled. He cannot be replaced. He can only be remembered. There comes a moment when a man stops waiting for an answer and starts listening to himself. For the first time, you stop reaching for your phone. You stop checking if she's viewed your story. You stop wondering what she's thinking. And in that stillness, something profound begins to shift. You start hearing a voice you'd ignored for too long, your own. It doesn't whisper fear anymore. It speaks peace. It says, "You've done enough." It says, "You don't need to prove your worth." It says, "Let go." This is the rise of the Stoic, the quiet rebirth that happens after you've exhausted every version of yourself that needed external validation. Because the truth is, silence isn't just about her. It's about you. You didn't stop texting because you stopped caring. You stopped texting because you started understanding. You realized that no amount of explaining could make someone see your value if they were never ready to see it. That no message, no closure, no speech could fix what was built on imbalance. You used to think closure came from conversation. Now you know it comes from composure. That's the moment a man crosses from reaction to mastery. When you were in the chaos, you reacted. You texted out of fear. You explained out of hope. You apologized for being misunderstood. But the Stoic doesn't live there anymore. He doesn't chase peace through noise. He creates it through silence. You stopped texting her, but you started hearing yourself, and that voice, calm, measured, powerful, became your compass. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you strengthen your discipline. Every time you let silence speak, you deepen your presence. Every time you choose peace over impulse, you become untouchable. Because the strongest men aren't the loudest, they're the most stable. The ones who don't flinch when ignored. The ones who don't seek revenge when forgotten. The ones who understand that detachment is not indifference, it's clarity. The Stoic doesn't withdraw because he's cold. He withdraws because he's wise. He knows that some battles aren't won through words, they're won through restraint. And that's when something unexpected happens. The energy shifts. The same silence that once felt heavy begins to feel empowering. What once was pain turns into perspective. What once felt like loss transforms into liberation. Your focus sharpens. Your posture changes. You start sleeping better, thinking clearer, walking taller. Because peace isn't passive, it's powerful. You're not running from emotion. You're mastering it. You're not avoiding connection. You're choosing which connections deserve your energy. That's the rise, the silent evolution from the man who needed closure to the man who has outgrown it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You've realized it. Your silence is no longer defense, it's direction. It's not a wall, it's a filter. It doesn't isolate you, it protects you. And that energy, it radiates. People start to notice, not because you're loud, but because you're composed, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you no longer need to. You've reached a level where attention feels cheap and peace feels expensive, where validation feels noisy and discipline feels divine. You no longer crave being understood because you understand yourself. You no longer need to win because you've already won. The only battle that mattered, mastery over your own mind. And while she once found comfort in your pursuit, now she finds silence in your calm. The same quiet that confused her now commands her attention. Because stillness has gravity, it pulls without force. This is the paradox of the Stoic. The less you try to prove, the more undeniable you become. The less you react, the more control you gain. The less you speak, the louder your presence grows. You've reached a stage where you no longer respond to emotion, you respond from composure. You don't need to teach her a lesson, your peace already has. You don't need to remind her of your worth, your absence already speaks it. Because silence backed by self-respect is not weakness, it's ascension. It's the silent awakening of a man who has outgrown the noise of validation. She might still wonder about you. She might still test your boundaries. But you no longer move to her rhythm. You move to your own. And that calm rhythm, that discipline, that quiet power, that's what separates you from the rest. You've learned that love without respect is noise, and peace without boundaries is chaos. So you guard both with silence. This is what the rise of the Stoic truly means. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign. You no longer react to the world. You regulate your world. You no longer seek control over others. You command control over yourself. And in that mastery, you rise not above her, but beyond her, not as a man who's colder, but as a man who's clearer, because clarity is the highest form of strength, and peace is the loudest form of power. There comes a moment when silence stops being something you practice and becomes something you are. At first, silence felt like discipline. You had to remind yourself not to reach out, not to explain, not to fall back into old patterns. It took strength to resist, effort to hold your composure. But now, it's effortless. It's who you are. You no longer choose silence. You embody it. And that's when your peace becomes magnetic, because real peace doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't announce its presence, doesn't demand attention. It commands it, without words, without effort. She feels it, Even if she'll never admit it, she feels it in the way your absence doesn't beg to be noticed. She feels it in the quiet gravity of your energy, the kind that lingers long after you've left the room or her life. She feels it in how grounded you've become, how you no longer orbit around emotion, how you've built a universe that runs on discipline instead of desire. That's when peace becomes power, because the calm of a man who has mastered himself cannot be replicated, only remembered. At first, she mistook your stillness for detachment. Now she understands it was depth. She used to think silence meant she won. Now she realizes silence means you've transcended the game entirely. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care differently. You care enough to protect your energy, to honor your time, to choose your peace over your pride. And that shift, that invisible inner transformation, changes everything. You don't post to prove you're over her. You don't respond to show you've moved on. You simply live, unbothered, balanced, free. And that quiet confidence carries more weight than any grand gesture ever could. Because true confidence doesn't seek validation, it radiates from within. It's the calm knowing that nothing external can shake what you've already stabilized inside. Your silence doesn't scream revenge, it whispers evolution. You didn't ghost her. You graduated. You didn't vanish to punish. You ascended to protect. She scrolls through your old messages, replaying memories she once ignored. Every sentence now sounds heavier, more meaningful, like a language she never bothered to learn when it mattered. She tries to replace you, but peace has no substitute. Because no one can fake stillness. Other men might match your looks. They might mimic your words. But they can't duplicate your energy because peace isn't performance. It's presence. That's what she misses now. Not the attention, not the affection, the energy, the calm that steadied her chaos, the discipline that refused to bend under pressure, the silence that held truth stronger than words ever could. She can't find it elsewhere, because she's surrounded by men who chase not command, who react not respond, who speak loudly but say nothing. You were different. You didn't fight for validation. You didn't beg to be chosen. You didn't collapse under silence. You became it. And that's what makes your peace so magnetic. You've become the embodiment of what she couldn't understand, that a man who controls his emotions controls the room, that a man who doesn't need to prove his worth becomes unforgettable, that a man who finds peace within himself stops needing peace from anyone else. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's where you live now, inside that retreat, where nothing external dictates your internal state, where silence isn't absence, but alignment, where the world might be loud, but you remain still. And ironically, that stillness makes noise. It reverberates through every memory she has of you. Every man she meets is measured against your restraint. Every moment of noise reminds her of the calm she once mistook for boredom. That's the paradox of peace. When you stop chasing validation, validation starts chasing you. When you stop seeking attention, attention finds you. When you stop trying to be seen, your presence becomes impossible to ignore, because energy doesn't lie. And yours, once chaotic, now Controlled speaks volumes without a sound. She might test the silence, sending a message, a reaction, a memory. But you no longer read it the same. There's no rush, no longing, no spark of pain. Only calm recognition, the kind that comes from having already healed. You read her words not with your heart, but with your awareness. You see the game, the loop, the energy behind it, and instead of responding, you smile, because peace has taught you that not everything that returns deserves a response. You understand now, closure isn't a conversation, it's a state of mind, and you've already reached it. Your silence doesn't separate you from her, it separates you from who you used to be. The man who needed to be heard, the man who feared being forgotten, the man who mistook attention for connection. He's gone. In his place stands someone unrecognizable, not because he's colder, but because he's complete. This is what it means to become a stoic man in the modern world, to rise above drama without running from emotion, to walk away from chaos without needing to explain, to hold power not in dominance, but in detachment. You no longer seek peace. You are peace. You no longer crave understanding. You embody clarity. You no longer fear silence. You wield it. Because when a man learns to sit in stillness without needing company, he becomes dangerous not to others, but to his old self. He's untouchable because he's free, unbothered because he's whole, magnetic because he's silent. And that's the final transformation, the point where your silence no longer carries pain, only power, where she no longer haunts you, but honors you, where your calm no longer hides your strength, it is your strength. So when she finally realizes she can't reach you anymore, it won't be because you blocked her. It'll be because you've risen to a frequency she can't access. And in that moment, she'll understand. Your silence didn't push her away. It elevated you beyond her reach. So now, you understand. Silence was never about punishing her. It was about purifying you. Every moment you resisted the urge to text. Every night you sat in stillness instead of reaching out. Every time you chose composure over chaos, you weren't losing. You were rising. Because true power doesn't come from control over others. It comes from control over yourself. That's the silent ascension, the point where your peace becomes louder than your presence ever was. Where your detachment no longer feels like emptiness, but freedom. Where you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. You've walked through the fire of emotion and come out untouched, not because you feel less, but because you understand more. You learned that peace is not passive, it's a discipline. You learned that silence is not weakness, it's awareness. You learned that distance doesn't destroy connection, it defines it. She may still wonder what you're thinking. She may still test the silence. But what she doesn't realize is that your silence is no longer about her. It's about mastery. You've evolved into the man who no longer texts out of longing, but speaks through presence. A man whose boundaries are firm, whose emotions are ordered, whose energy is sacred. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And your thoughts now, they're calm, measured, unshakable. You no longer react to the noise, you observe it. You no longer chase validation, you embody worth. You no longer fear loss, because what is meant for your peace cannot be taken. That's why your silence has power. Because it's no longer silence at all. It's signal. It's clarity. It's freedom. You've become the man who doesn't need to win arguments because he's already won himself. You've become the man who doesn't need to be understood because he lives in understanding. And that's why she'll always feel your presence long after your absence. Because peace leaves a deeper imprint than passion ever could. So, from this moment forward, don't break your silence. Be your silence. Don't chase understanding. Radiate it. Don't wait for closure. Become it. You didn't lose her. You found you. And that's the highest form of victory a man can ever achieve. If you've reached the point where peace means more than attention, where silence feels stronger than words, then you've already stepped into the Stoic path. Comment below, I choose silence. Join the brotherhood of Stoic truth. Because the world may remember words, but it bows to silence.